everybody, and welcome to this episode of Derek Invests. I'm your host, Derek Miller, and we're going to talk about Bitcoin today, everybody. What are we talking about Bitcoin for? Why? Well, it's simple. There's a lot of conversation about the topic, and I thought maybe simplifying the issue would help. So let me start by saying that Bitcoin is not a currency, and it's not a security, it's a property. Right, it's property, so that puts it outside of the SEC. Okay, because it's a property and it's maintained as a property by the fact that its valuation doesn't change. The way you value it, the way that it's constructed, doesn't change and has never changed. So that leaves it outside of the SEC because technically a group of people cannot influence the price of Bitcoin on their own. And that's the only coin, it's called Bitcoin. That's the only coin in the crypto universe that can make that statement. Okay. Everything else is a security. All right. Now, what is Bitcoin? Why did I say that it's comparable to gold? All right. So in our current system, the world transacts business in US dollars. Okay. US dollars are controlled. How much US dollar is in circulation is controlled by the Federal Reserve. Okay. Inflation is created also by the Federal Reserve. So, for example, this hyperinflation we're having now is due to a massive print that took place in 2021, which increased the amount of US dollars in circulation by 50% in 1 year, which could only lead to one thing. And that is hyperinflation, which is what we're experiencing now. Are we handling it well? Yes, we are. That's another conversation and that's another topic. But that creates the inflationary environment that we're in now because they're in control of those dollars. Okay, so the Fed prints money, and basically the reason it does that is that the U.S. Federal Reserve does that is because the world transacts business in US dollars. And so for the world to continue transacting big business, we have to create more dollars, and sometimes we rain dollars in, and this creates an inflationary environment. And really it gives a lot of control to the Federal Reserve because when you're in control of the money supply, you really are in control of everything. Okay, so that's the base of the system. That's the foundation for our current system. And the Federal Reserve has control of that. Is the Federal Reserve federal? No, it's a private company that charges interests on the dollars that it prints. So the people that own that particular company, basically, they don't care what goes on in the economy. All right. And you'll hear a lot of Bitcoin guys say chaos is good. I disagree, but chaos is good for economies. It's good for printing money. Right? It takes money to fund wars. It takes money to get you out of depressions. It takes money to do everything. So yes, chaos in that sense is good. And you'll hear a lot of Bitcoin guys talk about that. The chaos is good. Now, down there at that level of the Federal Reserve, they don't care who wins or loses anything. All they care about is that chaos, got to turn my light back on, is that chaos continues because they profit from that chaos. Okay. Now, the US dollar used to be based on gold. All right. So when we took over as the world reserve currency in 44, we used gold as the value of the dollar. And by what was it? I think it was 1972 or 1974. I always forget which it is that we went off the gold standard. So in 44, when we became the world currency reserve, I think we had about 13% of all the gold in the world. By the time we got to 1972 or 1974, we owned 75% of all the gold in the world. Now, why is that? Well, if you're the world reserve currency and your currency is based on gold, then you have to keep printing more money in order to keep the world economies flowing. You're going to need more gold, aren't you? So we owned about 75%. Right now, the U.S. owns about 17% of the gold in the world, which is funny for those gold bugs out there to think that gold has this value. The truth is, gold has always had a value. It is pretty, and it's a limited resource, I suppose, but there's many limited resources. The real value in gold was always the fact that it was tied to the US dollar, and that's why gold, if you look at gold as an asset, it hasn't done much. I mean, I think in 81 it was $1,200, okay, per ounce. It went up to 2,200, I think, recently. Maybe even slightly higher. Who cares? Call it 2,400. So it doubled since 1981. That was 40 years ago. I mean, that this is not an asset that is this great investment, this safe haven. It was a safe haven before because if anything happened to the dollar, you had gold, which was what the dollar was based on. Okay, so you need a basis for a currency. And then we went fiat. Why did we do that? There just wasn't enough gold for the world to continue transacting business if the US dollar was based on gold. Everybody thinks it was a conspiracy theory. It wasn't. How do you continue to transact business if you simply cannot have more dollars to put into the world economy? That's why we went off gold. We went fiat. And what happened from that? Well, initially, obviously, that allows government spending to go wild, for one, because they now don't have any, they don't have any breaks. They certainly don't care what the people want, and they certainly don't care about your pocketbooks. They don't. Now, do they want to keep the world running? Of course they do, right? I mean, don't be ridiculous. I know that, politics is politics and whatever, but of course they want to keep the world running. And you have to have some sort of regulation. When you have the bigger the group of humans that are in the village, so to speak, the bigger the regulatory body is going to be. When there's 8 people, there's still a chief. I mean, there's always a chief, right? Well, when you have hundreds of millions or billions, as we become more global, there has to be a regulatory body just to keep everybody from killing each other in the streets. So let's stay on point. The Federal Reserve is the base. The currency we use is dollars. It used to be based on gold, which controlled government spending. It kept the reins on the government. Okay. We went fiat because we had to transact business. Now, what's happened is that corporations around the world basically run the world. Corporations are the kings. Okay. And BlackRock, Fink, he's the dictator. I mean, not that he is actually a dictator, but like he's the biggest, right? Like he's the biggest guy because he runs the corporation that owns some of everything. This has gotten way out of control. These corporations then run the politicians that own the government, that control the money, because we're not attached to gold anymore. And so it's a mess, right? It's a mess. And listen, I'm not telling you that the new system, or the system that I believe we're going to transition to, is any better or any worse. What I'm telling you is you can see the problems with the system that we're in. Okay. Now, you're either somebody that wants to fix problems and take a risk, or you're somebody that wants to keep things exactly as they are, realizing that, look, this is the devil I know. That's the devil I don't. Most people will choose the devil that they know. Now, I live in California. We tend to choose the devil that we don't. If we see a problem, we try to fix it. And sometimes we fail miserably. And sometimes we're quite competent. That being said, you can't always be right. Right. So we can't have corporations running the world. This is ridiculous. We have to do something about it. Well, what can you do about it? Well, if you could get, Congress to give themselves term limits, that would be one way. If you had the Supreme Court overturn the ruling that made corporations people, which is ridiculous, maybe that would work. Is that process ever going to happen? No. All these people are invested in this system, right? And you just had Fink say, oh, Bitcoin is legitimate. So let's talk about Bitcoin. Why do I call Bitcoin gold? All right. The first thing you have to realize is that Bitcoin is not a currency, it's a property. Why is that important? Because it can't be regulated by the SEC. Everything else over there can be. Everything. All right. So you have currencies, you have platforms like Ethereum. Ethereum's a platform. And then you have your gold standard. Let's call it your gold standard. That's Bitcoin. So our layer over here works like this. You have your Federal Reserve. Okay. They create the currency. They print it. They create it. It's the same thing as Bitcoin mining, right? Except for they simply print it. That goes off to the banks. The banks loan money to businesses. They loan money to people. Banks is layer 2. So layer 1 is your Federal Reserve. Layer 2 is your banks. And then layer 3, you start to get into your investment houses, uh, your lenders, like your private lenders, corporations. Okay, so you can't really be involved in level one unless in layer one unless you started it. Layer two, you can get involved in, but they want to take you out, and we just saw that with FRC, the Silicon Valley Bank, which was enormous, that just went under. FRC, they want to take you out. The banking system's huge, nearly impossible to get involved in. Everybody pretty much plays at layer three level, as do I, right? So in layer three level, you have your investment houses, you have your we used to have brokerages, those have sort of disappeared. That would be your savings and loan would even have been a layer three. You have your advisors, your transactors, your platforms, all this kind of stuff. Okay, that's all happening on layer three. In the Bitcoin world, layer one is actually Bitcoin. Okay, and it's mined and it's created. Just and this would eliminate the need for a Federal Reserve. Okay, and also Bitcoin would be your gold, a gold that can't go away, by the way, and also a gold that takes time. It doesn't actually ever deplete, but it takes more and more time to mine. It has more expense to mine, so it grows at a rapid pace. Bitcoin, the number of coins will grow at a slower pace, not rapid. Bitcoin mining goes at a slower pace, which allows more currency to flow into the market, right? Like we said with gold, we simply ran out of gold, everybody. That's why we went off the gold standard. We ran out of it. You can't run out of Bitcoin, but you also can't hyper create Bitcoin like you can with fiat currency. So it solves a couple of problems. It eliminates the Federal Reserve. It does. It does grow, so we can use it as a currency. We can use it as a currency over a long period of time. Forever. I mean, forever, technically. And that's your layer one. This solves a lot of problems. It takes control away from certain people, and it also keeps governments in control of their theft. I mean, spending. That's what it is, everybody. If you haven't figured out that what governments do is money launder back to themselves, you got a lot of catching up to do. They're also completely needed. Governments are needed. You have to have people regulating the world. You just need a system that doesn't allow for so much corruption. And so this sort of solves that too, which is nice. Layer two is going to be your big institutions, right? So like banks over in layer two here, that's the people that do the lending. And again, it moves slower as you go down, right? So layer one, the Federal Reserve, almost no one can touch. It's already established. Those guys that own it have owned it forever. They probably don't like Bitcoin too much on the fact that they're going to be eliminated. But then you have layer two banks. And so you come over to Bitcoin, you're going to have the same kind of layer two. Most of us are going to function on layer three. That's where your transactions happen. That's your Coinbases. That's your trading, all that kind of stuff. Now, what's the beauty of Bitcoin? Why do people like it so much? First off, if you're a billionaire, you love it. Okay, because nobody can devalue your money. And also, if you're the guys at layer one, and they're never going to admit this, but if they're basically now the Federal Reserve, their money is also guaranteed forever. So if they took their money and they put it in there early, and they're sitting down here on all this Bitcoin, treasure troves of Bitcoin, it's a lot like that movie In Time with Justin Timberlake. You can't destroy it. There's no inflation to destroy it. They don't care about this. Will eliminate. So you hate to say this, but sometimes to pull economies out of a depression or to bolster spending into some defense company that the government's been paid off by, they'll start wars because more chaos, more money. That's not really the case over here. Not more chaos, more money. Is chaos still good? Yeah, because that's what keeps Bitcoin flowing, just like it keeps our world flowing. The difference is it's going to get rid of the need for a lot of this stuff, right? It just is. Long term, guys, we're generations. Everybody's going to tell you this stuff's going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. But when you look at it, and we're going to talk about some potential problems that are going to enter into this universe, this ethos as well. So here we have Bitcoin, right? Then we have our layer two, layer three is where most of us are going to operate. And there's a lot of layers above layer three, by the way. I mean, we're like the layer of our current economy is like 20, 30, 50 layers deep. I have no idea. So getting in at layer three isn't exactly a negative, right? It's just not. And within layer 3, there's layers, right? So, like, if you're in the investment world, that would be in layer 3. You have your market makers. They create markets. They love chaos too because they don't care. They eliminate risk. They just want transactions, right? Those are your market makers, because they just want transactions. They just want people on both sides moving. Above them, you have your investment houses. They bring new investments into the world, and over in the Bitcoin universe, the crypto universe, it would be bringing out new coins. And then above that, you have like your advisors, guys like me, educators, things along those lines. And the transactors, the people that control transactions, will like us more probably over there in the Bitcoin world than they care about us over here in the stock world, because like the rest of the system, and like I teach you here, there are people that can control price movements via supply and demand. But I have news for you. The same thing will happen over there. Believe me. The idea, I love the when someone talks about Bitcoin and this glorious, and that crypto, I should say crypto, not just Bitcoin. I'm talking Bitcoin today, but that whole ethos over there, they talk about it in this glorious. Let's remember, the stock market was created so that small companies could raise money to grow their company. That was the purpose of the stock market. Okay. What has it grown into? It's grown into what it is now, right? You don't think you're going to have those. So you think you're going to take humans out of that world? You're not. Okay. Humans are going to be there. So there's going to be corruptions that happen because people are involved. But what you will have is, it will eliminate the Federal Reserve. Let's talk about some potential problems as my son stares at me through the window. Let's talk about some potential problems that are going to happen. One, if you're the Federal Reserve and the guys that own that, you're probably dumping portions of your money into Bitcoin if you haven't already. Let's face it, the same guys that are in power, the guys with all the money, they're the ones that have, the billionaires. They have created Bitcoin and they're driving Bitcoin for a reason, because they can eliminate the risk of a company going under. They can erase the risk of countries going under. They can erase currency risk. They erase all risk to their money. So they're safe forever. Those of you that end up living on layer 3, life isn't going to look that much different for you. This is really a fight over layer 1 and layer 2. That's what it looks like to me. Okay. And I can't imagine the transition has no hiccups. I imagine there is hiccups. Sure, there's a lot of people that were at layer 1, layer 2 in the world we live now. They're in layer 1 and layer 2 over there. But there may be some that aren't. Maybe they missed the boat. Now, they're going to fight this thing, right? They're going to fight it if that's the case. So there can be some hiccups along the way. But I hope that explained a little bit about that world and the world we currently are in and why that world exists and how it may be helpful. But also, don't go believing the world only changes once, and that's going to be when it ends. Other than that, when humans are involved, you can't erase human corruption. I mean, look, what are some problems over in the Bitcoin world? Well, first off, it's all digital. How many cyber attacks do we have? If there's a guy that can create a barrier, a firewall, there's a guy that can break it. That's a huge risk over there. You can't really break the Federal Reserve. You can't like break it and steal the money-making machine. They'll just put another one in there, right? Over there, you hear all these guys talking about the power grid. My thought is the reason this conversation around the power grid is happening is because of the Bitcoin conversation I'm having with you now. I imagine that's a propaganda war happening at layer 1 and layer 2 of our current system, and layer 1 and layer 2 of the system that is being pushed for. But when you have guys like Fink jumping on board that own the biggest corporation in the world, you already know that those corporations are getting involved or are involved or heavily involved. And so does it really solve the corporate problem that we have? No, those same guys are just going to be in layer 1 and layer 2 over there. However, for those of you that think that Bitcoin is just going to go away, unless there is a massive cyber attack that knocks out the power grid, in which case our current system doesn't matter and that system doesn't matter. So if the Joker gets his hands on the button for a cyber attack because he just wants to see the world burn, neither of these systems are going to matter. All right. But hopefully that explains the Bitcoin ethos a little bit to you. And I can tell you that Bitcoin now does move a lot like a small cap stock. I can see the same footprints on any chart I look at, and other coins as well. And I'm going to start covering a lot more crypto in what I do because the same footprints already show up. I can already see them. That's how I know who's involved. And as always, it's gonna, there's gonna be things that are gonna work, things that are gonna fail. But I will say this: you have to try to fix the problems of the current system. This system is doing that. I do believe there will be a transition to that system. There always is a transition out of systems into new systems. I believe this is one of them, and I believe it's a place to be. But you have to be aware of where miners are profitable, which is like Bitcoin 8 to 12,000, something like that. And you have to be aware that there's some people that don't want Bitcoin to work. And the best way to help Bitcoin fail, outside of destroying the entire world, which no one is going to do, especially those in control, they have very, very easy lives. Why would they mess this up? But the next best thing would be to try to take out those miners, eliminate their profitability, and then take over those mining companies. And now you do have effectively a new central bank, because a central bank is a privately owned company. The Federal Reserve is a privately owned company, and now you would have private companies, most likely the companies that already exist, go in there and take over those miners. So those levels are something you have to be aware of, and you have to understand when you just go, oh, I buy, hodl. Don't hodl anything, people. That's a ridiculous notion. I can see why billionaires do, but billionaires can hodl over in these markets. They don't care. They don't have mortgages to worry about. That stuff's covered. They're looking generations down the line. They don't care about tiny little ups and downs. Those of us that have mortgages every month do. And that's why you have to be far more ferocious and far more intelligent. Remember something: the lower you fall on the ladder of the economic class, the smarter, the more aggressive, the more risk. You have to do everything more. All right. Keep that in mind. So I hope this was informative to you. This is going to go live 10:30. Well, you're probably watching it. So I'm going to repeat this, though. I'm going to repeat it at 3 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Happy Friday, everybody. Thank you so much. Remember, if you're not good up here, you're not good anywhere. Get outside. The sun's coming up, as you can see. Go for a walk. Smile. Fake it till you make it. You haven't failed yet. You know how I know? Because you're here and you're watching. Okay, so stay tuned, everybody. We're going to start covering a lot more of that crypto world. I hope that was a reasonable explanation and graspable. If you have any questions, please reach out.